Today, we are going to look into greenhouse gas emissions and global warming, CFC gas emissions and ozone layer depletion, COP21, Montreal Protocol, Kyoto Protocol, COP21 for environmental protection, refusal by some countries for complying with those protocols, concept of carbon trading, then of course natural resources scarcity and management. We'll be looking at all these subtopics today. Let's take the greenhouse gas emission and global warming. Global warming, if you look at the global environmental problems, I think if you see the UN body, what they have listed, starting from global warming, ozone depletion and destruction, sharp decrease of forest cover, declining of biological diversity, acid rain pollution, land desertification, marine pollution and damage, water pollution and freshwater resources shortage, toxic chemical pollution, and cross-border transfer of dangerous waste. These are all identified by the UN body as global environmental problems. Let's take the first one, greenhouse gases. My first question is greenhouse gas required or greenhouse effect required for this world? If you look at the reality, yes, greenhouse gases only making the Earth climate livable. According to Joe Fourier in 1824 research, he says if there is no global warming or global greenhouse gas effect, not global warming, greenhouse gas effect, Earth would be cooler by almost 33 degrees Celsius. That means we will be probably having, we are 30 to 33 degrees Celsius, our country temperature. So we probably have having zero temperature around that, the climate in Sri Lanka would be. So greenhouse gas effect is required to make the Earth livable. Now let's see what is global warming. The radiation from the sun comes in the form of short waves. It strikes the Earth becomes warmer, and the Earth emits long waves. The greenhouse gases, which forms a kind of a trap, do not allow the long waves to exit to the beyond the atmosphere. So then what happens? The Earth becomes warmer. Now there are three gases identified to contribute 90% to make this effect. One, we call it greenhouse gases, and the first one is carbon dioxide or CO2, then the methane, and the nitrous oxide. There are also other gases which give some effect to this, but they all put together comes to makes about 3%. So these three gases contribute a lot to the global warming. Pre-industrialization era, CO2 was 280 ppm. When I say ppm, it is per part per million. It was 280. Methane was 700. N2O was 270. So that's how the world was for 65,000 or 650,000 years. When they measured in 2010, CO2 reached 389, methane went up to 1,808, nitrous oxide went up to 322, that is 3,323.2. The increase when they measure is 39% for carbon dioxide, 158% for methane, and 20% for the nitrous oxide in 200 years. So that is what causing us the trouble. If we see the sources of the carbon dioxide, the natural is decomposing. Any hydrocarbon decompose will have CO2 coming out of it. Ocean is also releasing a certain amount of carbon dioxide. Then respiration, that is, we, the living beings, when we breathe, we let out the carbon dioxide. So respiration, these are natural phenomena. Then human action, which is man-made. One is the cement production, burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gases. That contribute to a huge amount. Then, of course, we not only put the carbon dioxide out, also do deforestation, cutting down the absorption facility that's available on Earth, cutting down the trees, by cutting down the trees. If you see the carbon dioxide emission by areas, you could see Asia is reasonably high. We are 3 large industrial countries with huge amount of population in Asia. Also, you could see as a country, United States is very significant, the amount of emission. Europe and Central Asia is almost that very many countries put together is almost equal to the United States than the other countries. So we in Asia also contribute to a lot. When I say Asia, as you know, a large population of the world lives in Asia. Therefore, our carbon output or carbon dioxide output is extremely high. Now, if you see the increase from 1990, when I say 1990 is because I always take this 1990 because many of you are, in your, we'll say if you are 30, 31 in the age, you have been living for the last 30, 31 years, young engineers. Therefore, I have taken this, and you will see the carbon dioxide growth or the increase in carbon dioxide altogether by almost, or when I say carbon dioxide, I can always say these are outputs. What they have given is output by different industries. So sorry, this is the total greenhouse gas emission is gone out by 43%, and carbon dioxide is gone up by a significant percentage. And if you see the other ones, they are marginally increased, whether you have methane or any other component, is the increase is very moderate, but carbon dioxide increase that is shown in the form of green color is significant. So, and they measure the difference between 1990 to 2015 is by 43% increase in the greenhouse gases. So it is really, really significant, the amount. These sources are actually from the World Bank reports that I took. By sector, if you see energy sector, all combustion engines also coming under energy. That's mostly used for our transport, plus also other forms of energy production, which burning coal or gas-fired power stations, and to all form to put together is a significant growth. Now, if you see the growth in the green color, which is the agriculture sector, the industrial process, waste, etc., the increase is reasonably small. But in the energy sector, which is the combustion engines, also get all the combustion engines also comes under that, is absolutely high. So we as people have started to use combustion engines, which is the either for transport or for other forms of energy, are contributing in a big way, producing carbon dioxide. So if you see the industry, energy industry is the big one. As I said, transport is also coming under energy, all forms of transport. Only the international transport is shown in a very small way, which is the aircraft and the sea transport. But this is actually the other forms of energy classified, and all the transport and the power stations, etc., is all classified, and all combustion engines basically coming under this blue sector. Now, we saw previously the human factor that has come into play, or how the CO2 is produced, what are the major causes of CO2 coming out. And we found fuel gases or fossil fuels is a major source of the carbon dioxide output. And you could see in this one. Now, let's go to the next gas, which is methane. Now, methane is relatively small compared to carbon dioxide. The damage it is done, but I will show you in a different graph how individual gases are playing the role in the total context of the greenhouse gases. If you see the methane, enteric fermentation is by the animals. I will explain a little bit on this. Biomasses, coal mining, landfill, oil and gas sector again contributing methane. Wastewater and sewer, etc., also emits methane. So we will see how where in areas, especially where the man is involved, how methane is produced in the coming slides. Animals, ruminant animals with multi-chambered stomach, which actually the goat, the cow, the bull, the deer, and animals which are eating grass and all the green, they can, they have the facility to do that, so they can digest those kind of very high cellulose plants and food. This enteric fermentation occurs when methane is produced in the rumen. Most of the methane is produced by belched by the animals. However, small percentage is also produced in the large intestine and passed out as flatulence. So animals, when they digest the food, which is very high on cellulose, which they eat as their normal food, part of their digestion process, they produce methane. Then, of course, the remains also, when they degrade, they also have a certain amount of methane coming out. Then let's see the next one. As I said, there are three gases contribute to the greenhouse gases or global warming, and this is the third one, the nitrous oxide. This is generally produced by when we produce nitric acid. That is one again, so it's a human action. Fertilizer, by a big percentage, is produced when manufacturing fertilizer, and the degradation of fertilizer also happens with nitrous oxide. Then we produce acetic acid, which is used for fabrics like nylon and other synthetic products. So these are the major source of nitrous oxide producing sources. Waste, of course, when it degrades also, as I said, produce certain amount of nitrous oxide. So these are the three sources that we saw how the global greenhouse gases are produced. And you will see always wherever man is involved or human nature is to ask for more and produce more. So you will see wherever the human action is there, we are producing the greenhouse gases contributing to global warming. This is, I said, in the nitrous oxide, you can see the production of fertilizer, 60% of the gas is emitted in the form of producing fertilizer. So as you can clearly see, this is a phenomena that started mainly after the Second World War. Producing fertilizer industry became very big after the Second World War, and we are producing loads of nitrous oxide in this 69%. So it's a very high percentage by producing fertilizer or in the process of fertilizer usage. Now, this is we analyzed three gases. You could see carbon dioxide contribute to 80%. 80% of the greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide. And you saw in the sources of carbon dioxide how the fossil fuel contributing. So carbon dioxide is 80%. That is why there is always a move to cut down the carbon dioxide. Okay, there are many forms, and we talk about energy. What we call we talk about always renewable energy, because the energy sector, whether it's a transport or any form of energy sector, contribute to huge amount of production of carbon dioxide. And in the global, in the greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide is contributing 80% of it. Methane is 10%, nitrous oxide is 7%. So these three gases put together is 97%. Now you could understand why we spoke about three gases, because the balance are insignificant, very, very small percentage, and there are a number of gases. I think ammonia contributes a majority of that one, but all put together, very small percentage. That's why we did not consider the other gases very much. Fluorine also very big. But anyway, these three gases are the major contributors put together: carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Now let's see the impact. Now we saw the three major greenhouse gases and the sources of the greenhouse gases. Now let's see the impact of having the greenhouse gases. First one, evaporation and precipitation. Now, when the temperature goes up, if we are talking about global warming, evaporation takes place naturally, and precipitation, whatever goes up comes down, then in the form of calamity of rain. Abnormal climate, we can all feel when the water content is high, you will see whatever sweat does not vaporize, so it will running down your body, and you can see the temperature increase in temperature can be easily felt. Abnormal weather. Apart from that, abnormal climate is dry seasons, too much of rain, calamities all the time. Damage to the ecosystem that we all know. The temperature rises. You all have seen in movies how the glaciers are melting. So all those are part of, and the rise of sea, etc. Those are all part of global warming. Then of course, too much of precipitation means floods, droughts. These are all abnormal climate. We saw it: droughts and floods and droughts. Water shortage. Okay, when there is drought, water shortage. This is, we talk about the potable water or drinking water, etc., or for farming, etc. Water shortage. Increased fire threats. Weed and pest invasions. Salt invasion. Yeah, when the water level goes down, always seawater comes in. Salt invasion. We do had some issues in the dry season. More salt water coming into Kaliniganga. So salt water invasion. Triggered disease related to heat wave. We did not have in this part of the world, but in northern India you could see, and many other countries you could see heat wave related disease. Damage to the economy naturally. You need a lot of energy to cool or to make it place to warm for heating or cooling. In our part of the world, we cool down. We reduce the temperature. In the Western countries or in polar regions, they have to warm. So a lot of energy is wasted for heating and cooling. And apart from that, if you talk about floods and droughts, that itself will do loads of damage to the economy. Threaten both the production and daily life of humankind or mankind. So these are the impacts that brought about by the global warming. Now we spoke about the first one, the global warming. Let's see what the world has done about it a little later. Now let's see about ozone depletion and destruction. This is actually, as I said, in the first one, we will take three matters, and one is this. Second one is ozone depletion and destruction. As you all know, ozone is formed in the atmosphere mostly by the electrical charge and ultraviolet rays from the sun. So it is the high concentration is in the stratosphere and absorb most of the sun's ultraviolet radiation. The first study started much late, actually. It's very late. Only in the 80s, people start to study the problem of ozone depletion. And only in 1980s, UK scientists found out ozone hole over Antarctica. so close to the pole region. They found there is a big ozone hole, and it was found only in 1980. Now, after that, they went into action. You all see later, much later in the presentation, how the world has taken action for some of these problems that we have been talking about. Then they found out ozone depleting substance is mainly chlorofluorocarbons, CFC we call it. They are gases which we produce a lot, or we use a lot of them for our cooling, air conditioning. So they found out chlorofluorocarbons is the cause of the depletion of ozone. Now, if you see the impact, if no restrictions are set on CFC emission by 2075, I mean, we would have started producing the gas CFC maybe about 40 to 50 years ago. And by 2075, I mean, we are talking about within about 125 years' time, the stratosphere ozone amount will be decreased by 40% compared to the 1985. They are only completely comparing 1985 to 2075. Okay, so it is a 90 years period that they are 1985 to 2075, only a 90-year period that they are comparing, and they think 40% will be gone by that time if you don't make any actions. And in that case, now if we allow it to go down by 40%, what will happen? The prediction is that, or the study shows, over 150 million people of skin cancer. I mean, this is annually, 150 million patients. They think a large population will be subject to skin cancer, and 18 million patients of cataract, I mean, which is the eye is damaged. So cataract patients will go up by 18 million. 7.5% of crop harvest will be dropped. That means the decrease in production of food will go down by 7.5%. 25% of aquatic products are lost. That means we talk about the aquatic products, we use them for a lot for food now, and there will be a 25% reduction. So, and they also say there will be a decline in human immunology function. So these are the damages and ozone depletion could cause. So we have to take actions definitely to prevent this happening. Now let's see what has done. Now, first, the world body started to act only in 1972. They established the UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Program. There is a communique. Okay, there is a question. Is B-paper exam physically or online due to COVID? You got to check that at the council. I do not have the information right now. So let's see the world action. Now see, the damages have been going on for a long time. In the last 200 years, we saw the damage that has taken place to the world on whether it's global warming or the ozone depletion, or that started much later. But only in 1972, very much later, the reason could be the two world wars. The world was taken apart, and there is a lot of confrontation and wars, and that may be one of the key reasons. After that, also there were major wars, even though they was not world wars. Those could contribute the world body acting. So only in 1972, the United Nations thought they have to act and form the United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP. And they had the first conference in Stockholm in 1972. So that was the first conference. Then in 1992, this conference is very famous, normally known as the Earth Summit, that took place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. in 1992. And the significance of that one is that 172 governments or countries took part and 108 heads of state took part. And when heads of states take part, the decisions are binding or even otherwise binding, but I think the contribution is much more. And 172 governments taking part itself is significant. So the world took interest in what's happening on Earth, and they want to act. And so the Earth Summit of 1992 is a significant. Okay, then in 1997, they went into the world body had their conference in Kyoto. So it's known as the Kyoto Protocol. And there, first time, something substantially took place. So the first time mandate that industrial nations cut their greenhouse gas emissions. So that is a mandate given in 1997, and we normally known as, that's very well known as Kyoto Protocol in December 1997, where the industrialized nations cut. So the mandate was given for the industrial nations to cut their greenhouse gas emissions. So one significant step took place by the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and that became a law only in 2005. I mean, can you understand? 1995, 97, the mandate, then that it becomes a law, international law, only in 2005. Another 8 years wait. Then in Bali conference in 2007, the roadmap was initiated for the negotiation process for strengthening full implementation of the Kyoto Protocol. So the Bali conference also, there's significance. These world conferences take place almost every year, but some of those conferences are significant because a concrete step has been taken. Bali roadmap is known as the Bali roadmap that initiated the negotiation process for strengthening full implementation of the Kyoto Protocol by end of 2009. So you could see the delay from 1997, the mandate, the implementation going into effect, and the roadmap, everything is 2009. So Bali conference is also something important, even though I did not mention it in the previous one. Then in Copenhagen Conference 2009, which reached the agreement that maintained the principle of common but differential responsibility, established United Nations Framework Convention, Climate Change, and Kyoto Protocol. So that is why 2009 conference is important. Reached agreement that maintained the principle of common established the United Nations Convention of Kyoto Protocol. They established the different responsibility based on different countries only in 2009. And also they made arrangement regarding the compulsory emission reduction by developed countries and voluntary mitigation by developing countries. So developed countries, mandatory compulsory reduction was put forward, and voluntary mitigation by developing countries. We as a developing country, we were asked to go in for voluntary mitigation of emitting greenhouse gases. This is a very significant conference called the COP, or Conference of the Parties, which is shortened form was COP21 of 2015. Now, there they agreed to limit the temperature of global warming to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees compared to the pre-industrial level, by reducing the global greenhouse gases emission by 25 and 30. We are now very closer to getting closer to those targets date. So this was a very significant conference because a specific number, okay, to cut the rise in temperature to or limit the rise to 1 to 2 degrees the most. That was arrived at this conference in 2015. Almost all the major powers except some other Eastern Bloc, we can call it, or you cannot call it Eastern Bloc by 2015. But Russia, and I think I'll show you the map how the countries accepted this and how countries did not accept the COP21 outcome. But what happened was, prior to the 2015 Paris conference, 117 countries, that is almost accounting for 90% of the emission, published a national contribution to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. That means they start to come out with specific numbers of how this can be reduced. Each contribution had to include quantifiable elements, the benchmark year, the implementation timetable, as well as the methodology to quantify greenhouse gas emissions. That means a very, very concrete step that took place in 2015 at the Paris conference, which is also known as COP21, because that is actually 21st conference in the line. That's what this was known as a COP21. Now, if you see the temperature, now the Paris Agreement was to limit the temperature to 1.5 or the maximum 2. Now, human activity has warmed the world by about 1.2 degrees since pre-industrial times. The current rate will be, at the current rate, it will reach 1.5 degrees by 2040. That is going to be 25% increase in 20 years. Now, we are in 2020 or 2021. So if you see from 2040, we are at 1.2 currently, and we will go to 1.5, which is 0.3 degrees. 0.3 degrees in increment for 1.2 degrees is 25%. So we are going to have a 25% increase in 20 years if we do not act. Actually, the rate of alarming is the rate of increase is really, really alarming. The global warming, the rate of increase. This is the all the green marked in green signed the Paris Accord. And you would see the countries, some of the countries that are marked in darker color did not sign. But something very significant took place about USA. Then the president of USA was Barack Obama. Barack Obama signed this accord. 2 years later, when the name doesn't come to me, the last president prior to the president, the name doesn't strike me at once. Okay, he withdrew in 2017 when he became the president. So even though, all right, the name has come, Donald Trump. Yes, thank you. So when Barack Obama signed this Paris Accord in 2015, and they thought, okay, as you all know, USA is a significant contributor to the greenhouse gases, and they thought the conference itself is a success. But 2 years later, when the new president came in, and he went out of the accord and he said that he cannot, citing the economic reasons. We'll also later see why the countries are sometimes reluctant to enforce these agreements. So this was the status in 2015 agreement. You could see some of the most developed countries, except this is Russia, and some of the conflicting countries here, took part, and this is Venezuela, naturally a very strong ally of Russia, did not sign, but many other countries, these are all warring countries in this area, Iraq and Turkey was not a warring country, but they are also involved in some kind of conflict all the time. So It was a major victory, they thought, when majority of the countries agreed to limit the temperature and to limit the temperature to 1.5 degrees. But it so happened, America withdrew 2 years later. Between something happens. Can move to the next slide. 7. It's stuck for what? Move to the next. There's a long delay and moves what happens. The major emitters, notably China and European Union, undertook ambitious commitments. All countries participated, including the least developed countries, which committed to taking steps to reduce their emissions. Several states, you can see the country, Cape Verde, Papua New Guinea, Samoa, Vanuatu, indicated that they want to go into 100% renewable energy by 15 years, which means by 2030, these countries agreed to go into 100% renewable energy. So that was a major victory, they thought at that time. But America going out in 2 years' time really made a lot of damages. Now let's see what happened by COP26. COP26 took place this year in Glasgow. This is actually the third meeting of the parties of 2015 Paris Agreement and 16th meeting of the parties of the Kyoto Protocol. So you can see how many meetings are taking place as an action towards global warming. What happened this year was a move to end the coal power and fossil fuel subsidies. Subsidies are given in many countries to keep the energy cost low by the governments so that they can continue to use fossil fuels for cheaper energy. So this is one of the landmark agreement of COP26 that took place this year. All the countries agreed to end the subsidies for fossil fuel. There are also countries, when you say fossil fuel, as I said, it is petroleum related product or coal and etc. In many countries, to keep the cost low, government provide the subsidies. Even in Sri Lanka, we are given subsidies for some of the fuels that I know to keep the transport cost low and etc. But the government agreed to end the coal power fossil fuel subsidies and fossil fuels subsidies. So I don't know how Sri Lanka agreed on this, but the agreement was that coal power and fossil fuel subsidies to be ended by the government. The pact was first climate deal to explicitly commit to reduce the use of coal. And this one also was a major step towards reducing the use of coal. So this is actually all about carbon dioxide. We spoke about anything that we spoke about is mostly about so from Kyoto Protocol to all these COP21 that we spoke about one which is actually mostly this keeps running suddenly about greenhouse gas emissions. All of this that I mentioned is all about reducing the greenhouse gas emission and the agreements. That is why some of the agreements from Earth Summit to Kyoto Protocol to COP21 etc. are very important conferences to remember. Then of course we went into the ozone layer, the conferences that took place with regard to reducing the impact of ozone depletion. The most notable conference was the Montreal Protocol on 16th September 1987. So that conference is all about mitigating the damage we are doing to the ozone layer. So phasing out the production of numerous substances that are responsible for ozone depletion. So that was one of the key area that the conference or the participants took part or focused on. It was agreed and entered into force on 1st of January 1989. So the action is reasonably fast. 1980 they understood the damage to the ozone layer. Or ozone layer was identified first, and the damage was identified soon after. Then in 1987, the major conference, and by 89, they have gone into action. I think the reason they went into action because only the effect on the countries of the developed world is much more on, if you see the damage done by the ozone depletion. That is one. The second, it is mostly certain gases that are used in certain industries. So the limiting or the controlling that one was little easy the moment they find a replacement. Anyway, it was agreed and entered into force on 1st January 1989. So it's pretty fast. A first conference on the ozone depletion was in 1987, an agreement and entered into force in 1989 within 2 years. Since then, 9 revisions has taken place. There had been a 1990 conference, 1991, 92. There had been many conferences taken place since then. But the first conference is significant because that was the first step that we took to mitigate the damages. And the agreement was reached 2 years later. And after all these conferences, as a result of the international agreement, the ozone hole in Atlantic or in Antarctica is slowly recovering. Now the study says it is recovering. So it is a kind of a fast action that we took. It's already producing results. So I think we are should be happy that one of the damage that we thought happening to the earth is slowly being reduced and we are slowly recovering. Now, I told you how USA signed the agreement and withdrew 2 years later. Now, what is the reason countries do not comply with the greenhouse gas reduction protocols? One of the biggest reasons is the economies are built on fossil fuels. Dependency on fossil fuel is extremely high for many countries. Even in Sri Lanka, if you say there is no fuel tomorrow, or from say next month or next year, we will have loads of difficulties because the Sri Lankan economy is built depending on the fossil fuel. Not only Sri Lanka, many other countries. They are not only as consumers, there are also many countries as producers of fossil fuels. So there are economies dependency on the fossil fuel as a producer, also as a consumer at the same time, and some are not producing at all, but major consumer like Sri Lanka, like many other countries, like maybe in Singapore. I think Japan is a major consumer and not producing any. So because the economy is so dependent on fossil fuel, they are unable to implement or comply with the agreements they reach. So citing economic downfall is the main reason. So that is actually the reason even cited by President when he withdrew from in 2017. Trump, when he withdrew from the Paris Protocol in 2017, that was the only reason that he went out of the protocol, the signature, because one of his key reason was to develop the gas fields of USA. And that was election undertaking that he gave, and he has to go out of the Paris, signing the Paris Accord, go out of that one because he was producing more and more fossil fuel. Then, of course, we all know at the moment we have certain amount of technology available. When we all know fossil fuel we are mostly using for energy, and there are technologies now to reduce and go into renewable energy, but there is a huge requirement of a capital. The huge capital is required as investment to and adapt new technologies and to go into alternate energy sources. So the non-availability of capital is also one of the other reasons why why countries do not comply with the the protocols that they have agreed upon. So one, they are too much dependent on the fossil fuel. Then the new capital is required naturally if they want to go into alternate energy. Expanding population need additional land for living and farming. Reduce green cover. As I said, we always continue to reduce green cover. We need food. We need living space. With the expansion of population, we continue to cut down that too. And that when we cut down the green cover, we take out the carbon dioxide sink. So that is also one of the reason. We are going out of it. I mean, keeping the green cover is also one of the way to do it. I mean, later in carbon trading, you will see how we could how the green cover is playing a major role in that. Then, of course, increased demand in food, more fertilizer. You see, fertilizer is one of the key factor in methane, and sorry, not in methane. It is in which gas? Nitrogen, no, N2O. Okay, nitrous oxide, and more food is in demand, and more fertilizer is used, and we are continuing to add more and more fertilizer, which is coming out with which is emitting the N2O, and we are unable to reduce it because the demand for food is keep growing with our population. So these are the reasons why countries are not complying with the greenhouse gas reduction protocols that whatever they have agreed upon. Let's now let me go to the first one again. So we spoke about the greenhouse gas emissions. We spoke about the CFC gas emission, ozone layer depletion. We looked at COP21, Montreal Protocol. This is for ozone. Then, of course, Kyoto Protocol. COP26. I told you that we had in last month in Glasgow for environmental protection. Now we have looked at it. Then also we looked at the refusal by some countries for complying with these protocols. Why they are not? Now we will go into carbon trading, and then the other one, natural resources scarcity and management. Am I too fast here? Is there anything that you all want to raise before I go into carbon trading and natural resources scarcity? I've been talking non-stop in a class environment. That wouldn't be the case. Anything that you can actually raise with the question in writing? Let me take a few minutes pause to see if there anyone posting questions. Okay, we heard the news last year or this year that the ozone hole going to recover totally because of the holding the machinery works developing countries, China, etc. Reduce the human activity due to the COVID pandemic. Possible. COVID pandemic may have done a lot good to mankind. You would see, I mean, there were a lot of videos going around, even animals were freely moving when we all went inside the house. So it may be doing a lot good to us, but I do not have any scientific data to comment. Some of these informations are given by those who love to write on social media. I haven't seen a scientific article to say that we are totally recovered. But I'm sure that pandemic did a lot good for the environment because our activities went down. Hardly even look at us. We were hardly traveling, so our consumption on fuel was so low, even for our fuel power for transport. Not only us, then all our activities come down, means energy requirement comes down because we were not partying, there were no functions. A lot of other energy saving also take place. So that may have done a lot good to the society. But it can, whatever damage it done to the mankind is also there. But I cannot comment that whether we have fully recovered because I am yet to see any scientific articles on that matter. LNG is also a fossil fuel. Oh, there's a question. How do we compare LNG with fossil fuel? LNG is also a fossil fuel. It's a petroleum gas. So mostly come from the oil fields, isn't it? Also, it's a naturally produced also, but it is considered as a fossil fuel. So therefore, and the availability is very little, not to the level that we are using coal. Coal is the major fuel in the world today, to my knowledge. So, and petroleum, of course. So, no, the availability of LNG can compensate to the total elimination of coal and the petroleum fields that we are having heavy fuel. I have no idea on that, but I'm sure LNG it's available in some countries, and well, the people are going more dependent on LNG. The reason is it is little more clean burning. About the liquid fertilizer having high emission rate, I do not have an information. Some of the information that you're asking, because the information what you ask, I have to keep finding on the fertilizer, etc. How about CO2 footprint in coal, diesel, and oil, which are used to generate electricity? Okay, carbon footprint is extremely high in coal, diesel, and oil because it is what emits is basically carbon dioxide. So it's extremely high. We spoke about the energy, the carbon dioxide output due to energy production is the highest form, and that's keep increasing with the increase of manpower with the population. And we are in need of energy all the time, and our needs keep changing. So we need more energy, and the cheapest form is coal. So we always run to coal. Then of course the other one is the petroleum based, and we do enough and more damages because of that. And the technology those technologies are quite old, so their technologies are very cheap. Only the fuel that you have to buy, and that's why we are keep going for petroleum related fuels or coal. Coal is absolutely the cheapest, even though the damage it does is extremely high. Coal is still the cheapest fuel anywhere in the world. And even if you see the data of the power production in China, coal-fired power stations are extremely high in number. And I have been talking to some of it is out of the data that I have. I've been talking to some of my suppliers, and they said the government has reduced the power supply to industry, and their production has been cut to 3 days because of they are cutting down the coal-fired power stations. So they are limiting the power given to the industry because the industry is very much dependent on the coal at the moment, because that is the cheapest form of energy production. But I think all of you need to read a lot on this, because I'm touching the surface. In most of the cases, I'm touching just the surface. You got to read more, because First of all, I actually want to take you through up to why countries refuse. The meaning is what is greenhouse gases, global warming, emissions. These are the key protocols that we have, or the conferences, and refusal by some countries. As I said, every subject can be a day's presentation. Every subject. If you see, if you go into detail of COP26, which we had recently, you can have a 1 day's presentation on that. That detail they have gone into. So we are actually just touching the edge of everything, because when I am doing a short presentation to you all. All right. Let's see. Let's go into concept of carbon trading. It's not moving again. It moves when it waits, when it moves. Okay, let's see carbon trading. These are some of the how to say mechanism that has been brought about to control the carbon emission. Carbon trading is a process of buying and selling permits and credits that allow the permit holder to emit carbon dioxide. So it's all about mostly carbon dioxide. It is called the emission trading. Let's see the picture in the next one will illustrate easily what is carbon trading. The system works by setting an overall limit or cap, the amount of emission that are allowed from significant sources of carbon. So first you set the limits. Then people who have not achieved pay a penalty or buy it from somebody else. Let's see I think the next slide will give you the. Now here you see two industries, company A and company B. The limitation given to them, both have 10% reduction commitments, same CIG emissions levels. Okay, fine. Global the greenhouse gas emission level at same level, and they have been asked to cut by 10%. Company A cut by 15%. Okay, they have brought in new technology or newer mechanisms, newer working times, etc., etc. They cut down by 15%. B only was able to cut by 5%. Meaning is B can buy the credit from A paying some money. That is this carbon trading. So here what happened is two things have happened. One, the limit cap came in. You put a cap, everybody has to cut by 10%, 5%, 8%, 15%, industry to industry, it can vary. So bringing a cap first, then those who invest, now cutting this by 15%, one has to make an investment. Either bring in new technology, new timing, etc., etc., etc. They have to bring in to reduce this energy. Now, whereas B, say, continue to, or their investment is so small, then they are unable to achieve the target. They manage to achieve only 5%. So then what happened? They buy the credit from them, pay for the reduced emission. Okay, so they have to pay him and buy the credits. So this way, one is asked to pay more for not reducing or meeting the cap. So this is like a tax. So you can also consider it as a tax, because if you do not reduce, you are given a tax. Maybe you are paying to the other factory and buying the credit from them. So this is actually called carbon trading. There's another matter also. I'll bring into that one. So this is basically carbon trading. It's a very simple fact. People are given a cap first. You meet that. If you are not, you buy from somebody else who has met or pay it in the form of tax. Governments also do the trading. Now, world over, like the exchanges, the moment something trading comes in, an exchange comes in. There are a few exchanges that are come into play. There is carbon emission trading exchanges are there. There is European climate exchanges there. Nasdaq is there. Nasdaq is in US. OMX Commodities Europe. Power. Next, there are future commodity exchange. Barista Lava. I don't know where it is. European Energy Exchange. So there are few exchanges, like you sell any commodity or your stock or anything. There are exchanges. If you have metal, you have the famous the London Metal Exchange. Commodity, you have the New York Commodity Exchange. Stock exchanges are in every country. So they have brought in the international exchanges for people to trade. So these are exchanges that come into play. How they operate, how the modality of trading, you need to read, because that itself is a long subject. So carbon credits are received from auctions. So they also through the auctions. Now I have credit, I auction. So at the exchange, auctions, and you trade, you buy it, or buy or sell, both, given for free to firms by governments. Can you understand? This is if the companies are unable to invest, government can buy and give it free, but the government will meet the cost of it. Carbon credits are used as greenhouse gases are emitted. So as greenhouse gases are emitted, carbon credits are used. Used carbon credits can be sold and more credits can be bought. So it's a trading exchange. As I say, government also get involved. In a way, it's like tax also, but at the same time, it can be a traded commodity now, a traded matter. So you can actually, international exchanges are there to trade. Sri Lanka has not gone in yet. Let's see that one in another slide. A cap and trade system necessarily harm the economy because it is designed to raise the cost of energy. You can see it at once. Because as I said, earlier we spoke about A and B. You have to reduce the cost of energy by emission of CO2 is only by making changes. Is either the technology is changed, the way that you produce is changed, your raw material composition is changed. Some or the other you have to change, and that is at a cost. The cap and trade system is simply a mechanism to put a price on emission. Naturally, it has put a price on emission, okay, in order to compel businesses and consumers to emit less. So this is actually a cap system. First, you create a cap, and if you don't meet it, you as a cost. Now to meet it also, companies have to spend. That's a question here. Okay, somebody want me to explain it very slowly. So let me go back to the previous one. Suddenly this won't scroll. It will scroll, then it will stop. Okay, is this concept is understood? There is a limitation put into the industry. We'll say they have here, the example says 10% reduction. Commitment is for 10% reduction. When the company A has reduced by 15%. Now, how do people reduce their emission? Always by investing on new technologies, or sometime on newer time frame, working times, etc., etc. You have to change the raw material concept so that the different machinery can work, different time frame of working in the office to just save energy. All that is possible. Make use of more sunlight. All kind of things can be done. So companies need to invest more to reduce greenhouse gas emission. That is important. So this company A, by investing, is able to reduce 15%. Now their target is only to reduce 10%, but they have gone down up to 15%. Whereas company B is unable to cut down. They managed to go down by only by 5%. Then company buys the credit from A. Maybe, of course, not directly, through a trading exchange. I told you there are exchanges. So this company has something to sell and there is somebody to buy. So this carbon trading is also at a very costly, it's a costly affair. At a cost, you are meeting the cap. That is what this carbon trading is all about. they put a cap first. For everywhere, they say, okay, this is the limit. You cannot go beyond it. So companies are asked to invest to meet the cut. And if you don't meet the cut, you can buy it in an exchange. As I said, there are a number of exchanges that are operating in the world now. Some I have listed here. So your carbon credit can be traded. So somebody who has invested very heavily, say for example, on sunlight, somebody has invested heavily. They have changed the building in such a way, lighting is totally sunlight. And ventilation methods have changed so that the energy consumption for heating or cooling has come down. Maybe the raw material composition is changed so that it has to go through 3 processes, has cut down to 2 processes. All that is possible if you invest in technology. Maybe you can reduce the manpower too. All that is possible. But when you reduce at a cost, you have got certain credits. If you go down below the value, then you try to sell that at an exchange to people who want it. That is what the carbon trading is about. So as I said, sometimes governments also, so if a companies cannot meet, governments can give them the credit. Governments. Okay, so cost can be either, this is a kind of subsidizing the carbon cost by the government. As I said, world over, governments to keep the employment, etc., subsidize certain industries. And these are actions taken by the governments like that. So carbon credits are used as a greenhouse gases. So carbon credits are used as greenhouse gases are emitted. So every time you emit the greenhouse gas, you use the credit if you have it. If you don't have the credit, you have to buy the credit from somewhere. So it is at a cost. As I said, it is used as carbon credits are sold and credits are bought. So it is at a commodity, you can buy, you can sell it. So it's basically a cost. If you see, you put the cap first. Then you try to ask people to meet it. If you don't meet it, you buy it from somebody who has met it. And so that is what this carbon trading is all about. It's quite a simple mechanism, but implementing is not going to be very easy because country to country in a different situation. We will see that one little later. So this is essentially like an emission tax. If you don't meet your emission standard, then you go and buy it. That is what it is. It is basically work like a tax. So somebody is given a financial, a penalty if you don't meet the cut. You buy it from somewhere at a cost. That's basically, it's like work like a carbon emission tax. Okay, so meeting the reduction standard is mandatory when the carbon trading is in place. Now the drawbacks, as I said, the drawbacks. the non-linear nature of the climate. This is one of the problem. Complicated calculation carbon effects. Offsets are little difficult always because climatic condition changes. So complicated calculation. So this carbon offset has not going in very smoothly yet. Then the enforcement. You ask the company to meet or a factory to meet a particular standard. They don't meet, enforcing or giving a penalty, enforcing it. It's become a problem. If somebody is asked to pay a penalty, if they don't pay, what do you do? So enforcing has become a problem. Then one more thing. Now here you could see somebody has the money, can continue to buy the credit and keep emitting. So this is the other problem. Concentration of wealth among rich, meaning carbon trading often counteracts the attempts to reduce poverty. Naturally, third world countries or developing countries want to grow, and for growth, one part of damage we do is emission. Now, at the same time, we don't have the money, as developing countries don't need money to buy the credits, whereas the richer nations have the money so that they can buy the credits and keep emitting. So these are the other drawbacks of the carbon trading. There are certain drawbacks. I think that Biggest problem is calculation and the implementation. This is not very easy. Actually, I did lots of reading on this and found calculation is one of the major hassle of this carbon trading. Even though there are many mechanisms are put forward, country to country try to manipulate that mechanism always to favor them. That is one of the reasons, and then becomes problem of enforcement, becomes an issue. That was one more. No one sell the credit. Then what happened? No one sell the credit to company B. Then what happens? Then the government step in. The governments. This is where the government comes into play. Actually, if you implement this one, then company B has to cut down their production altogether. Okay, if no one sell credit and if they have not met the standard, they have to cut down their factory or production or all kind of things. So that again costs them money. But this production need to go, they step in and support them with the credit that they can. Always exchanges have. Now there is one country who have gone neutral or negative is actually Bhutan, isn't it? Anyway, so we discussed the drawbacks, consumption of wealth. Okay, richer people who have emitted all the gases and grown up and have become wealthy nations now bring in the standards and limiting the developing nations not growing. And to make things worse, they have the money to buy the credit. So actually, the reduced poverty becomes a problem. This one is upset again. I want to go into the next one. Okay, now let's go to the carbon offset. Now, carbon trading is one, carbon offset is another one. Now, carbon offset is reduction or removal of emission of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases made in order to compensate for emissions made elsewhere. I think this diagram is nowadays. So and so is emitting. Here there is a jungle somewhere. They are paying them to green more, to keep that as it is. Now, this is happening somewhere in Indonesia that I am aware of. To not to cut their green, the developed nations are paying, say, I'm emitting so much of carbon to keep the jungle in certain areas, they pay because they say, okay, I'm paying for the carbon that I am emitting for the absorption of carbon by the carbon sink or the trees. So this is the carbon offset. So trading is one, offset is one. Offset is much more nicer though. It has its own negative aspects. But what happened is, because of this carbon offset concept, these richer nations are paying to keep the green in many parts of the world now. So they are asked to pay for this. And I think this is working to some extent, probably could come better than the carbon trading at one time. So this is the carbon offset is a better concept, because end of the day, if you see here, they have cut down by 10%. I don't say no, but both are emitting the carbon dioxide here. In this way, one is emitting, one is absorbing. So it goes for the total reduction. Though they are continue to, if they have the money, they continue to emit more and more, and making this carbon sink, which is the trees, to have it elsewhere, pay in another country to green more. So this is actually one of the carbon offset, which is also, I think, in my way, the way I look at it, it can be a better results producing one, though someone has to keep their land allocation for jungles, so which in fact may affect that particular country's well-being. Of course, if somebody is paying for it, may be better, but these are things that one has to be looked at a broader view. Okay, let's see how is the carbon trading in Sri Lanka. Now, if you look at the carbon trading in Sri Lanka has not yet to introduce a legislation. As you say, without a legislation, nothing can be implemented proper, because where is the line drawn? So Sri Lanka is yet to introduce a legislation for carbon trading. Of course, there is a voluntary initiative there. They call themselves as carbon credit scheme. So that's a voluntary scheme is in place, but there is no major carbon trading is happening in this country yet. At the last conference, there was a statement by the president saying that Sri Lanka will become carbon neutral. That means our emission will be absorbed by our own, green, whatever, by 2050. I don't know how with our level of investment, not having money to invest, I really don't know how much this is achievable, but that's a challenge given to us as a nation. We should try to. So Sri Lanka is at the infancy of carbon trading. Hardly have any positive step put in place. Let me break for about 3-4 minutes and start with the concept of sustainable development. All right. Let's go with start with this is actually the last of the topic, concept of sustainable development. The concept of sustainable development itself was described only in 1987. You can see ever since the Industrial Revolution, we have been doing all kind of damages to the earth. And only in 1987, the Bertland Commission report came out about the sustainable development. Sustainable development defines as development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Just imagine, we have to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. That we call sustainable development. The concept of sustainable development formed the basis of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio 1992. So the 1992 itself, they started to talk about, at the Earth Summit, they started to talk about the sustainable development. So the framework, promotion and implementation plans for concrete ways to realize it was released by the Johannesburg Declaration in 2002. So 10 years later, here the concept, here they think that they are going to move, and 10 years later, they come out with the implementation plan for implementation plan to realize the sustainable development. This is all about by the UN body. Now, these are the 3 pillars of sustainable development. One is the social factor, the economic factor, and the ecological factor. These are the 3 pillars of sustainability. If one of that one goes down, sustainability cannot be sustained. The sustainability will not be there. We will see some damage being caused to one factor. Then in in 2015 they fixed 17 goals by 193 countries in 2015. You all know where the conference took place in 2015. They came out with 17 goals through sustainable development, economic, environmental, and social development. Their overall objective is to create a better world and better life by 2030. So we have gone, we have become very much closer now. Just I think this year is going to be over. So we are just 9 years from where we thought we fixed the goals, and 15 years goal they set, and we are just 9 years away from the goal that they set. So there were 15 goals fixed by the United Nations. Do a reading on that. These are actually larger subjects. Do a reading on these matters. Important deep reading is required by you all. So at the heart of the 230 agenda, you know, by 230, they have an agenda to meet or target to meet, are the 5 critical dimensions. 5 P's they call it: people, prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace. So these are the 5 P's they think should be in the agenda. You know, the critical dimension. They say they are the 5 critical dimensions, and these are the critical aspects of it: economical, social, economical, and ecological. And you see how easily they are connecting it. Peace, people, prosperity, which well-being, planet, which is the earth, and partnership and peace. Naturally, if partnership and peace is achieved by partnership, and if peace is gone down, everything else will be damaged. People will be damaged, prosperity will be damaged, planet also will be damaged. So peace is also a very important factor in the equation, and that's why they call the critical dimension of the 1930 agenda the 5 P's. Then, of course, when we talk about, now say you got to draw parallel. When it comes to sustainable development, we say what are the key factors that are happened in the international arena. How the United Nations has gone in is what I said, and what is defined by sustainable development, that we said. Now, then comes, now when you come to development, always we have a problem of national resources and scarcity. Thus, when there is a scarcity, immediately what comes as one is mandatory is proper management. Now, what the resources that are in scarcity is demand of water, food, energy, land, and minerals is rising sustainability, making natural resources increase. You don't need this one. These are the 5 factors now. So these are the important resources that are going into scarcity: demand for water, food, energy, land, and minerals. Okay. So what happens when it becomes, the scarcity goes up? Naturally, expensive, the cost keep going up all the time. Then comes the management. Now, you have one factor, limited resources. The other one, the wants, unlimited wants. That is the human aspect. We have unlimited wants. Now, scarcity of goods and services. Now, this has to be managed, because our lands, our resources are limited, and our wants are unlimited. Now, so what we have to do is we got to economize the problem. Okay, have to economize the problem. Then there are societies 3 options to deal with. One is economic growth. When you say economic growth, I'll define that one, economic growth, as increase in ability to produce goods and service. That is you call economic growth. In this one, when I say economic growth, it is the increased ability to produce goods and services. That is actually, we call it economic growth. Improve the use of available resources. That you can understand, it is simple English. Improve the use of available resources, that are subsection. Then reduce the want. I mean, which we have the unlimited want is causing the trouble. Reduce the want is another way to deal with the problem. Though we can do it or not, this is one method of resolving the problem. Now, when we say improve the use of availability of resources, one, Allocative efficiency. Now that explains the word explain itself. Allocative efficiency. How we allocate the resources. See, the resources are limited. Where we allocate, for what we allocate, it's called the allocative efficiency. That is an important factor. Then productive efficiency. As you all know, wastage is limited. Productive efficiency, it's easy self-introductory, the subject, the word itself. Productive efficiency. Allocative efficiency, how we allocate the resources. Productive efficiency is how we use the resources. Then equity. Equity is make it available to all. Equity is distribution of income of goods and services by fair means. As I said, make it. Now, when you are asked to manage, you can easily cut down from one group and give it to another group, which is not so. Then it will create social problem. As you said, one of the pillar is social. So if you do not maintain the equity is not maintained, mean social is distant. Immediately. So equity is very, very important to, as I said here, distribution of income and goods and services by fair means. That's called equity. Then the full employment. I'll define it again. Employment is the full employment. No, employment. What I say is full employment as using all available, example, labor, factories, mines, fields. That means you use the whatever available. Now, resources, we define what the resources are. We have to use anything else in fully, that's what we call it employment. They are in that way that you can, manage the resources. So, depleting resources going to be a problem for every engineer, depleting resources. And how you're going to manage it, it's an aspect that has to go into your mind of how. We saw it, economic growth, I'll go back again, increase the availability of products and goods and services called the economic growth. We got to make it available to all, or availability. Improve the use of available resources. How we improve? Here we have allocative efficiency, productive efficiency, equity, which is, it has to be available to all. Then full employment means allocating the factories, the machinery, the manpower, those things. Because limited resources are, the natural resources most of the time. So these are what we think we should employ. This is the best way of improving the use of available resources. As I said, reduce the want is, we can do it at some level, but as of now, we have reduced in this country, we have reduced the wants to a great extent because of non-availability of a lot of items. So this is one way, but that has, I'm just drawing a parallel, but that has no connection with this, limited resources. But we spoke about how we're going to manage. So economizing the problem of managing the limited resources is one way to get the best out of it. That's all I want to discuss today. Is there any question that you want to raise? You could raise. I will give it for another few minutes for you all to raise anything that you want. As I said, in every subject, I have gone in with the surface. You have to read. Do we have full question for this paper? I have no idea of the examination. Most possibly, I have taken 2 modules, and there is a possibility of you having questions on both modules that I took. But I think you have the options. I mean, there are, I was told, I'm not part of the examination setup. So I was told that always there are mandatory questions and optional questions. So this will definitely come under optional. Can we have the last slide on the screen? All right. Can we release this one, please? Okay. Oh, my suddenly not move again. Give me a little time. This moves again, don't move. break by itself. All right, that's a screen that I want. Now, reduce the want. Now, we'll see, we analyze the resource. One is potable water. Okay, how can we reduce the want? Very simple, isn't it? We also, our unlimited wants, but we also love to wash the car, we'll say, small amount. Somebody like to drink, you have to have for your bathing or whatever other purposes. Yes, food, yes, needed. But unlimited want is what? Would love to have a, spray to the garden, a large garden, etc. Then you reduce the want, mean what? I better don't water my garden. I'll have to find another way to do it. I mean, if the limited resource is limited for you, I think I have lived in countries where there is very limited water or potable water. Drinking water was always available, but in other form there are a lot of limitations, and a very dusty country that was, though is very modernized, but off the road is very dusty, and people use a kind of a feather-like thing to clean the vehicles. Okay, you cannot come with a dirty car to the city. So people, but somebody who is wealthy will spray the water and wash the car. It's a water scarce country. There is very limited water, and most of the water is converted from the seawater and deep well resources. But I think it's very limited clean water was there. So reduce the limit. This is how you can now. For example, the other example that comes into play is that you will see maybe 50 years ago, our use of oil was very limited. Our use of oil for food, I will say, I'm talking about the food. Today, the use of oil is much higher. Imagine what the damage it costs. Anything fried or whatever is more tasty, so we went to go for it. Now, that is one resource we can go back to our formal way of eating, correct? You can reduce the wants. You see the textile. We went in with ammonia, not ammonia, it's N2O production. We are having all the nylon or synthetic material. And it's more fashionable, whatever. If you reduce the want, you can go back to cotton. We are from a warm country, would love to. Of course, many other people cannot use it. But as I said, everything has a negative complications. You can reduce the want is by individual household level. If you start to think, doing at a country level, it's quite simple. Quite simple. Now, everybody love to ride a car. How about in countries, many countries, they have reduced the tax system for parking so heavily, nobody takes the car. Everybody uses public transport. Everybody uses public transport. Parking is basically so exorbitantly high cost in those cities, and finding a parking is other problem. Because of the parking cost is extremely high, people are forced. That's a government action, but somebody can by themselves also can go into use of public transport and reducing the want. I don't want to use my car for anything, everything, or maybe, not having a car at all. These are all reduced want. Of course, it is go against the ultimate unlimited wants. Everybody love to have their own private vehicles and keep upgrading better and better and better. See what happens to our mobile phones. The same mobile phone what we used 5 years ago, 3 years ago can be used, but what we do? We generally, every time a new model comes, we keep buying it. We keep buying it. Not because the previous one has gone off. In some cases, yes. Most of the time, we love to have something new that comes to the market. We move with market trend. So that is something that we can go out of. So that is actually the reduce want. Let me see the other question. Separate water line. Sorry. Let me read some of these messages. Exam when and time. I have no idea. You have to check with the one second. Let me. Okay. Can we see the last screen? Okay. Last slide. Okay. Can we reduce wants? Okay. Give an example. Fine. Exam, when the time, I have no idea exam time. Please check with the council itself. Admission, please, I have no idea. Let us check with, I'm only taking a lecture. Separate water line for drink and washing purpose, like. Yeah, okay, people come out with engineers. Said postpone all. I don't know what is postpone all. I don't understand what is postpone. Again, the term. Postpone all. Okay, somebody are giving explanation. Fine. About nuclear power. Is it free? Yes, nuclear power is free of global greenhouse gases. But as I said, investment is extremely high. And the other danger. That's why I think Japan is started shutting down the nuclear power station one by one, because they had major accidents a couple of years ago, or maybe 6 years ago, I think. So when it comes to greenhouse gases, yes, nuclear power is very clean. But other one is the huge investment. Second one, actually the accidents, and that then there is another problem coming out, is the waste. Where to discard the waste? Now, the nuclear waste is something that you cannot go and leave it anywhere. So every power station come out with the waste. So countries have got into problem of managing the nuclear waste. So I cannot, for greenhouse gas emission, nuclear power is a direct solution, immediate solution. I could say yes, but that has its own problems as well. So nothing like the renewable energy, I mean, which has very less impact on Earth. Of course, there's an investment. Investment is huge, whether it's on photo cells to convert the sunlight into electricity, or wind. The investment is huge, so we may have to come out, and that's why the world is moving in that direction anyway. World is moving in that direction. So thank you. Information. All right, fine. So let me close this session with this. I hope you all got some information, and go for more reading. Always reading that give you more and more information on that. So one more inclusion. Thank you for the lecture. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for taking parts. Let me wish, I think you all are heading for the exam. Let me wish all of you good luck with the examinations.